Welcome to the show. On a recent trip to Sheffield, we stopped in at the Wild Country factory to get the lowdown on their new friend, cam. These guys have a long history of making bomb-proof cams, so we had a chat with Wild Country veteran Steve Foster to find out about the evolution of the friend.
My name's Steve Foster. I'm currently the marketing director of Wild Country, although I started way back in '89 as a humble rep, trailing around the country in a car trying to sell climbing gear. Wild Country was formed in actually 1977 by two guys. One was an American called Ray Jardine, and one was an English guy called Mark Valance. Jardine was an avid climber at the top of his game at the time in Yosemite. He was also a scientist and he's actually involved in aerospace engineering. But he found that the equipment of the day wasn't sufficient to give him the apparatus to climb the very best and hardest routes in Yosemite. So he set about thinking about a piece of equipment to protect those parallel cracks. And Mark Valance came back through Yosemite to do some climbing and met Ray in the valley, and they became friends and started climbing together. But in the beginning, Ray wouldn't show him the prototypes because he didn't want to give anything away. And they were setting off to climb one day, and Mark said, you know, he wanted to say, have you got your new cams or whatever they called them at the time? But he couldn't actually describe them. So he said, have you got the bag of friends with you? And the name stuck, and they've been called friends ever since. So we're into '77 now, and Ray was looking for somebody to back him for the production of the Friend. And so, it seems odd in these days, but he couldn't get any backing in America to produce them. And Mark said, I'll produce them. And he came back to the UK, sold his house, and invested all the money in creating a workshop to create the first Friend. So that was actually in Tidesville in the Peak District, where we still are to this day. That's where the factory is now. So this is the first production. It's a little bit sticky now, but considering it's nearly 40 years old, it still works pretty well. In fact, you could still take that out and use it, it'd be perfectly safe. Mark realised that people would want to use them in rocks other than granite. Granite is a very high friction rock. And they came up with this very accurate 13.75 degrees. And that is the angle at which the cam interacts with the crack when you place it. So whatever position the cam's in, it will always make that angle with the rock. It's critically important because it's optimised to the maximum number of rock frictions. And that angle has remained throughout, even to the very latest iteration of the Wild Country Friend, which is the double axle one there. The reason to have a rigid stem was Ray wanted when you fell off, the load coming through the carabiner and the sling to be directly transmitted to the cams. So the cams are fixed, but the stem can move. It was only later that, as things and experience improved, that we moved on to a flexible stem. Ray at the time was really against it because he was so convinced that a rigid stem would work. Well, what it allowed us is to create smaller and smaller iterations for thinner and thinner cracks. The ultimate example of that is, I'll jump a few years here, but we came up with the Zero Friend. It works in exactly the same way as that, but it goes into an incredibly small crack, and that is the smallest cam ever made. It also allowed us to move up to incredibly huge cams. And this is the biggest cam ever made. This is the Technical 6. As you can see, it's a monster, and it's currently being used by the Wide Boys out on the White Rim in their new route. So that's still in use today now.
I'm James Pearson, one of Wild Country's sponsored climbers, and I'm here climbing with Caroline, my wife, to test out the new Friends in the Peak. I've been climbing on these new units for probably almost a year now, but really they're such a massive step up from what we had before, because even if this thing is moving slightly, the lobes are never going to invert. They're always going to stay solid, and that's a real big advantage when you're climbing at your limit.
We moved on to more and more technicality in the flexible system, so we moved on to cams that were made from an extrusion. So it's like a continuous process where you push metal out like a stick of rock almost, and then you slice it and machine it to the shape. It has limitations because you end up having more metal than you need. And when you move to a hot forging, you're able to put exactly the amount of metal that you need in the right place, and so the cam gets lighter weight And then forge cams were the first proofs for forge cams. You couldn't create that in any other way other than to hot forge it. That's where the metal's heated up, put into a die and then crushed under tremendous force. Although it has lots of advantages, it has some disadvantages, which we came to believe could be solved with moving to a double axle. So the new double axle has lots of innovation in it. These are some of the heavy components of any cam. Is the axle has to be immensely strong. In the early days, the first ones were chrome, molybdenum, steel. And then as stainless steel technology improved, we were able to move to stainless steel cams. But it's still a heavy bit of metal, and when you've got two of them, you've got double the weight. So we moved to hollow ones, which is cutting edge technology, hollow axles. We also brought through our forge technology, so you only put the metal where you want it to be, there's no surplus metal. We've got a very lightweight stem system, we've got a thumb loop, and then finally we've got an extendable sling. This means that you can go lighter, you don't have to carry an extra quick draw. It's the original 13.75 angle, single stem floating trigger patent that we had all those years ago, but moved into a new double axle design. And we agonised about the name of it because we'd gone through flexible friends, technical friends, helium friends, and we just thought it's a friend, and so it's the new friend.
If you want to get your hands on the new friend, we have a rather tasty deal going on right now in the EpicTV shop, so click on the link below to find out more. Have a great day.